It's time to knit. Episode 2, we are going to begin the sweater project. This is the part you're going to accomplish with what you're going to learn in this episode. You can see here 2 colors, and I want to show you how differently your sweater can turn out depending on the color and the type of yarn that you choose for the project. So think about that. As you're learning this type of seamless sweater knitting, you're also learning a way to knit a sweater that you can customize to various sizes, various seasons, designs. You can make it in so many different colors. This one is very much for winter, cold weather. But this sweater will be more for springtime and maybe late autumn time. Now the video is going to continue taking you through the steps to work on the rib and the body of the sweater. There are going to be 2 ways shown of casting on. You can use any way of casting on for this project. It will work. I will show you one that's very common and one that I found to be much more accommodating to the needs of this project beginning. Let's knit. You would have made your gauge and you would have taken the measurements for the bust of the sweater. Remember the sketch from episode 1? This is the measurement you want to take, and you're measuring your favorite garment, your favorite sweatshirt or sweater, not your body. Now, the project I'm working on will measure 44 inches around, 112 centimeters. And I'm starting at the bottom with 210 stitches. Depending on your measurement, you will be closer to 40 or 48 or 52, 56, 60, and you will choose a different number of stitches to cast on. If you're doing this for the first time, and if these measurements are close to what will work for you, I think it'll be easiest to do what I do. So we are going to cast on 210 stitches. Then we will continue working our rib in 2 knit 2 purl for 21 rows. I have my 5mm needles like we planned for this project, and I need a very long tail of yarn if I'm going to do a long tail cast on. That is the type of cast on I showed you in the preparation video. It's mostly what people learn when they first start knitting, so that's what we're going to stick with. If you'd rather use straight needles to cast on this first row, you can definitely do that. Make sure that you keep counting as you work. That's my first 10 stitches. You will notice that I'm holding 2 needles together. It makes it so much easier when beginning to work to avoid having very tight, unstretchable bottom of the rib. Now you notice that we're getting many stitches. We'll need to pull 1 needle out before we knit the first foundation row. If you tend to have very tight casting on, you may want to do this on straight needles and then knit off of them onto your round needles. Now you will keep going until you have the stitches you need, and I will keep going until I have 210. Many minutes later, I want to show you something. This long tail cast on method on round sweater knitting has a disadvantage. of having to start over if you don't estimate correctly the length of the tail you need for your long tail cast on. That is what happened here. I need 60 more stitches, but I didn't estimate correctly. So I need to take this off my needles and start over. And because I want this project to be beginner friendly, I want you to be able to feel okay that you need to start over. It's not a big deal, but I also want to show you one more method of casting on. So here we go. To start without the long tail cast on, you will come to the end of the yarn. You will get the first 2 stitches on as if you were doing long tail cast on. So here's 1 and here is 2. And now you are going to knit on the following stitches. 2, you go through, grab the yarn, bring it out, and put the new stitch on the needle. 3, in, grab the yarn, new stitch on the needle. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Depending on the size of the sweater you're doing, you will proceed until you have the number of stitches you need. Over the years, I've heard so many different names for this type of casting on. You'll probably have your own favorite name. My favorite way I heard people name this casting on method is the knit on chain. We keep going. I need 210 stitches. How many do you need? With this knit on chain casting on method, you need to be very careful about your tension. You don't want to work too tightly because you're putting stitches on only one needle. I have 30. I need 210. $40 stitches. So you see, it's going to look different, but also pretty. And it's going to help you cast on only once because you don't have that estimating of the long tail impossibility happening for you. But if you don't feel ready to learn a different way of casting on, it's okay. You can still work with the long tail cast on. That's really up to you. Okay, I have 40. I need 210. Let's keep going. All right, some minutes later, I have finished casting on 210 stitches, and you probably have as well. You saw 2 ways of casting on, long tail and this one, which has several names, but I like the knitted chain method. You choose your name. I'm sure depending on where you live, you will have a different name. Now, you may want to start knitting in the round right away. You can. If you're a beginner, I don't suggest doing that because you will have to deal with twisting of this foundation. So we're going to make our way back and then close the round. Now also, we have 210 stitches. We're going to add one more for 211, which will be used to close the round. All right, so now I'm going to knit 1, knit 2, purl 1, purl 2. And now I'm going to do the knit stitches in the way that I showed you in episode 1 of this tutorial series. I will go under, through the stitch, slip and turn, put it back, and knit. You don't have to do this. It's a way to make your bottom of the rib follow the wave of knit and purl, valleys and hills. If you don't do this, you'll just have a straight line on the bottom and then rib on top. It's totally okay to do that. It's not a problem. Okay, one more knit. Under the work, through the stitch, slip, turn, and knit. Now 2 purl. Under the work, through the stitch, slip, turn, and knit. One more like this. Under, in, slip, turn, knit. 2 purl. Under, in, slip, turn, knit. One more time. Under, in, slip, turn, knit. 2 purl. Under, in, slip, turn, knit. One more. You will do this 2 purl, 2 knit with the twists or turns, however you want to name them, for the foundation row of your rib until you have finished all the stitches. In my case, 210 plus 1. We are now at the end of my foundation row. You can see here what it's looking like. What you want to do before closing the round, you want to use your fingers to make sure that the bottom of the foundation row is on the bottom, really on the bottom. Now I know that at this point, if you're doing this for the very first time, you might be feeling worried about the difficulty of the project. I want to remind you that you are at the most difficult part of the project. Once we close the round and set it up, it's going to be smooth sailing and no seams. As we close the round, we're going to also place the marker at the beginning in our second row. So prepare the marker that you're going to use so that at the end of the first row, you can put it in place and it's going to always remind you when you have worked one time around. Okay, so here I am. I put everything to the bottom. I went all the way around with my fingers. And now I want to turn my needles so that I can close the round. And I need to scooch all of this work, spreading it around. Keeping the edge on the bottom and bringing it to the tip of the needle on the other side where we are going to close the round. This little tail is going to help us know where the round begins, but the further we get away from it, the harder it'll be to use it as the anchor. So we are going to have a stitch marker in place for that. Okay, you now want to get the one extra stitch knitted together with the first stitch on the opposite needle. Also, notice that we have 2 knit, 2 purl. 2 knit, 2 purl. Pay attention. Okay, here we go. I'm going to put this stitch onto the needle on the left. I keep the tension secure, and I'm going to knit them together. And now I have 1 knit. So I put this one back. I can put the stitch marker on now, or you can do it in the second row. Either way is okay. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to recount. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see I'm coming to the end of the round. Now I want to show you something. What I have here is 4 purl stitches next to each other. This may bother some of you. If this happens on your count of stitches, you have some options. You can make it 2 knit, 1 purl, 1 knit. You can insert a purl stitch to separate them, or you can make 4 knit stitches or 3 knit stitches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make 3 knit stitches. And I'm going to put that over here. I'm going to stop now, put the stitch marker in place, knit a few stitches in 2-2 pattern, and then I'm going to pay attention to this tail so that I close the gap and enjoy having a finished connection here on the bottom. I will take a sewing yarn needle, thread the little end in, and come to this gap, and I'm going to work from the bottom to weave it in. Following the shape of the chain stitch. And now that it's woven in, you can use a felting needle to felt it in place and trim. If you don't have a felting needle, you can just weave it in securely, clip it off. And now I find it much more enjoyable that the bottom edge is finished. I have my stitch marker to remind me of the start of the round. If for some reason I lose it, I can always count the rows. And now I continue around. We check our pattern in the notebook. And we see that we need 21 rows for the rib. I am doing 210 stitches for the size that I want. 2 knit, 2 purl, 21 rows. Once you finish 21 rows, you will decrease and transition to stockinette stitch. You will have 176 stitches if you're doing the same size I'm doing. But let's first finish the rib. 21 rows. We finished 2. This is the third one. Total of 21 rows is what we need for this 2 purl 2 knit rib. I keep saying rows, but they're really rounds since we have connected this in the round and are creating a seamless sweater. You can breathe a breath of relief, for the hardest part of this project is over. The casting on and establishing the foundation row are really the hardest parts. We have finished 21 rounds of our 2-2 rib for the bottom of the sweater. It's time to do the decrease round and to switch to stockinette stitch. Regardless of the number of stitches you have, you want to decrease by 34 stitches. You have 2 rounds of opportunity to do this. It helps in case that you don't do your calculations correctly. You want to take the number of stitches you have, which for me is 209. Remember that I adjusted so that I don't have 4 knit stitches but only 3 at the beginning of the round. And I'm going to add 2 to the number of stitches I want to decrease by. So 34 plus 2 is 36. And then I'm going to divide 209 by 36. I'm going to get 5.81. If I divide 209 by 34, I will get 6.15. This tells me that it is very safe to decrease every 6th stitch. That means I will knit 5, knit 2 together, knit 5, knit 2 together. Then we will count the stitches. When I was doing the test to design this project, in the next row I needed to decrease 2 more, and I did it at each end. But let's see what will happen for your stitch counts. All right, this is how we will work. The first round is changing all of purl stitches to knit and keeping the knit. So everything is going to be knit. And because we're knitting in rounds, you now continue only doing knit stitches. There are no more purl stitches until we get to the rib around the neck and around the sleeves. I've done 2, now 3, 4, 5, and now I want to work these 2 together. 6. Think of your 6 times tables, for example, and you can keep counting without having to start at 1 all the time. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now I work these 2 together. 12. 16, 17, work these 2 together. Notice that if I have purl and then knit, I'm going to switch the order before I work them together to make it look more smooth. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Now I have 2 purl stitches. I'm gonna actually decrease at 23, knit and purl together, and do 24 single. You see, I do that to make this nice smooth decrease. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, work 2 together, 30. $75, $76, $77, $78, $79. I'll knit 1 to keep my stitch marker in place, and then I'm gonna open the notebook. 176 stitches. Why? Because 210 minus 34 is 176. If you have fewer stitches, you are going to have fewer stitches left, but you are always going to decrease by 34. Okay, for this size that I'm working, we need 176. I have 179. I need to decrease by 3 more. I'm going to say 179 divided by 4. That is 44.75. I'm going to decrease on the 45th stitch. I now knit all the way around. $41, $42, $43, $44, and now I decrease at $45 by knitting 2 together. 45 plus 45 is 90, so my next decrease will be at 90. 85, 86, 87, 88, 89. Now decrease at 90. 90 plus 45 is 135. So my next decrease will be at 135. One 130, 31, 32, 33, 34, knit 2 together for 35. $73, $74, $75, $176. We finished 2 rounds in stockinette stitch. We transitioned into working the body of the sweater. Now you will want to place a marker on left and right. We already have one, we need one more. We're going to work 88 stitches, then place one more marker. That will tell us the left and right edge of our sweater. I'm going to use different markers so that I know the place where my round begins. So you may want to use different charms or different colors. The little bee tells me that's where my round begins. The honeycomb tells me that's where the other side is. So let's count 88. $90. I went too far. Walk back 2 for 88 and place the marker. Now I'm going to count again to make sure I have 88 to the end of the round. It's always good to double check our counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. $88, and the stitch marker B tells me I'm at the beginning of the next round. What happens next is you continue to work knitting every round to create stockinette stitch that you have established now on 176 stitches. For my sample, when I was designing this project, I needed 63 rows because I wanted a 16-inch length. Somewhere between 16 to 18 inches is the length you're going to want. Depending on your tension, you may need more or less rows. So do not stop exactly at 63 and do not wait to measure to get to 63. Start measuring somewhere at the 50th row and decide what length of the sweater you want. You will measure this dimension from under the arm of the sleeve and body connection on the garment you're following for the sizing to where you want the bottom rib of your sweater to reach. So that is the measurement you're going to need so that you can keep an eye on how many rows you want to knit. Because you might want to do this project again in the future and customize it, it is a good idea to write it down in your notebook. And then when you do things, again, you take notes. For example, I can say that when I did every 5th decrease, I had 2 more in the following round. But when I did every 6th decrease, like I showed you in the video, I had 3 more stitches to decrease in the next round. That is something to put in the notebook. And I will, and then I'll take a picture and include this in the description so that you can have my notebook sample to create your own. In the description, you're going to see the type of yarn and the needle size reminder that I'm using. But I would love to know your comments, the questions you have. Maybe you run into a problem or two as you're doing this first part of the rib and switching to stockinette stitch for the body of your sweater. Let me know what questions you have so I can help you in the comments with answers. And do share what types of yarn you're using and why you're choosing those yarns. It will give others an inspiration on what they may want to use for their projects, depending on how much time you have to work. This part of the sweater might take you several days, sometimes a week or two, if you only work a little bit at a time. Let's take a close look at what we have here. This is the rib you worked 2-2 with the stretchy bottom. And then we did a decrease here for 2 rounds to transition into the body of the sweater. And we continued knitting each round to have stockinette stitch for the sweater body. Now, how much to knit? This is the bottom of your sweater. You want to measure from this edge to the bottom of the needle, and when this measures the length that you want to have from the bottom to the place where the sleeves meet the body of the sweater, that is the time to stop knitting and go to episode 3. For some of you, that might be 16 inches, for some 18 inches, for some 17. I don't recommend this style of sweater going longer than 18 inches, for it becomes a tunic and requires some shaping, which we are not doing, keeping it a beginner-friendly sweater. So you want to measure the garment length that you want to have from underarm where the sleeve and the body of the sweater meet to the bottom of the rib. That is how much you're going to keep knitting in rounds. You saw the hardest part of this project, the beginning. It's a long round to set up and connect. So once you're past that, you're well off into the easier parts of this project. Episode 3 will be out in about a week, and we will work on stopping the knitting here, putting it on hold, and working on the 2 sleeves. Now is a good time to think about whether you want color work or not. That decision you'll need to have by next episode. It's going to take you a little while to knit. There are quite a few rows and stitches to get through. See you when you're ready to add the sleeves.